Now the topic today is Ireland. Look at that. That guy is gonna win a fashion show right there. My word. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know where the British flag came from. Hello everybody. Roger says hey. So in the video I posted yesterday on Napoleon's defeat in Aspern, I did mention that my next video was going to be on the UK, but a lot of my UK videos so far have been focused mainly on England, so I wanted to kind of branch out a little bit and focus on some other areas of the UK. And I know that Ireland is split between Northern Ireland, and that only Northern Ireland is part of the UK, and Ireland is its own thing. So I got that down from the difference between the UK, Great Britain, and England video that I did probably a couple of months ago now. But in that video I did raise the question, why is Ireland split up like that? And after I had thought about it a little bit and a lot of your comments had reminded me, I remembered, oh yeah, there was a war that happened and I think it has something to do with religion. But other than that, I really don't know anything about it, and I know I'm ashamed to admit that. We probably learn about it just like extremely briefly in our history classes here in the US. Maybe some of the stuff that I'm going to watch in this video will be familiar to me. Now, when I was in California, I was a film critic there, and one of the films that I had to review was called Jimmy's Hall. Some of you might be familiar with it. I believe it was a British film, but basically it was about an Irishman who had lived in New York City and then he moved back home to Ireland after the War of Independence there. I think it's set in 1932, and he wanted to open a dance hall for like the local kids to come and hang out in, but the Catholic Church had a major problem with that, and so they tried to shut him down, and you know, it became this whole big thing in this small town. It's based on a true story as well. So if you guys are familiar with that story or that movie, let me know. And so usually it's about this time in the video where I do comment time, and that is where I go back to my previous video and whatever the subject is we're doing, and I read your comments and we discuss them. But since this is my first video on Ireland, we're just gonna kind of go right into the reaction on this one. Oh, and Roger wants to know from all of you in Ireland, is there an Irish hat that he can wear when we learn about Ireland? Because if you know Roger, he likes his themed hats. So if there's like a traditional Irish hat that he would look at in, let us know. Oh, and I think I mentioned before that my family is half Irish and half English. And I know some of you over there don't like Americans making claims on like their European heritage or whatever. My last name, if you heard it, you would say, yeah, you're Irish. I was also told that red hair is more of a Scottish thing than maybe an Irish thing, but I actually do have some red in my hair. It's hard to see it on video. In fact, my latest post on Instagram has a picture of me outside kind of in the snow, and I think you can see more of the red in my hair in that picture. But I guess we'll just go ahead and get into this. I'm really excited to learn about this part of history and this part of the world. But this video that we're going to watch is from the channel WonderWhy. It's got 4.6 million views and it's got a really good thumbs up rating, so hopefully it's going to be a good one. I'm sure I'm going to have questions that pop up during this video, so forgive me for pausing it here or there. So let's get into it.
This is the island of Ireland. The island is politically split between the Republic of Ireland, an independent country, and Northern Ireland, which together with Scotland, England and Wales form the United Kingdom. But why exactly is Ireland split, and when did it happen? To fully understand the situation, we need to go all the way back to the 12th century. After the Normans had successfully invaded England and taken the throne, they decided to invade Ireland.
1066, right? I've had a lot of people tell me you need to watch videos about the Normans invading England.
12th century. After the Normans had successfully invaded England and taken the throne, they decided to invade Ireland. Henry II, with the authorisation of Pope Adrian IV to strengthen the papacy's control over the Irish Church, landed in Ireland in 1171 and took control of large parts of the island, and in the following year the Lordship of Ireland was created, in which the Lord of Ireland was also the King of England. The Lordship of Ireland was a papal possession held by the King of England. This was the beginning of what would become centuries of...
Hang on.
It was a papal
This is giving me CGP Grey vibes here a little bit, so if he doesn't talk quite as fast. Alright, so the Pope is at the top here. Lordship of Ireland. Does papal possession just mean that they are in charge? England, held in Fife? F-I-E-F, held in Fife. What the heck does that mean? An estate of land, especially one held on condition of feudal service, or a person's sphere of operation or control. Okay, so basically England's in charge of Ireland.
Papal possession held by the King of England. This was the beginning of what would become centuries of English and later British rule over the island of Ireland.
Okay, English, British rule over the Island of Ireland timeline. Lordship of Ireland, which is connected to the Pope. We go all the way to basically the end of the Middle Ages, and we have the Kingdom of Ireland. And then we get into the 1800s, we have just Ireland. And then Northern Ireland breaks off, it looks like in the early 1900s. So that must be the War of Independence for Ireland that I referred to previously when I was talking about that film, Irish Free State. Well, you know, this isn't too complicated. It's basically like 4 major eras right here. Although we do have the English flag here and the British flag, so at some point, you know, that changed.
What would become centuries of English and later British rule over the island of Ireland. Officially, the Lordship of Ireland ruled over the entire island, but in reality control was much less than this, and over the years English control of Ireland receded over time. This was a time before there was a religious difference between Ireland and England. The English and the native Irish were both Catholic nations, as this was a time before the emergence of Protestantism.
Romano-British-born missionary St. Patrick introduced Christianity to Ireland in the 5th century. Oh, so this is St. Patrick. So this is the guy that St. Patrick's Day is named after? I mean, you know how you celebrate these holidays sometimes and you have no idea where they actually came from. It's just, that's me and St. Patrick's Day. Romano-British, is that referring to like the Roman empires? What is Romano-British? I did not expect to have this many questions so early on in the video. We're a minute in, and I've already had like 20 questions. I apologize. I really do. Okay, so we're going back to like the 400s AD here. St. Patrick is introducing Christianity to Ireland.
So many of the Normans in Ireland assimilated into Irish culture, and some were said to have become more Irish than the Irish themselves.
Okay, another question. Who are the Normans exactly? Like, where are they from? It looks like they were coming from France. Were they the precursors to the French?
Assimilated into Irish culture, and some were said to have become more Irish than the Irish themselves. Laws were introduced which banned intermarriage between English settlers and the Gaelic Irish, as well as a ban on the use of the Irish language, but these laws were largely ineffective. By the late 15th century, English rule was limited to an area known as the Pale. The early 16th century and what became known as the Protestant Reformation, in which many European powers turned their back on the Roman Catholic Church, forming a new branch of the Christian faith. Although the Reformation was about religion, it also had a lot to do with politics as well. With Henry VIII as the King of England, the Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. This, as well as other contributing factors, caused Henry VIII to break away from the Roman Catholic Church and establish the Church of England, with himself as the leader.
Oh,
with this, the political situation in Ireland became uncertain, as Ireland was a papal possession with the King of England as Lord of Ireland. In 1542, after
Okay, let's listen to that little bit again.
With this, the political situation in Ireland became uncertain, as Ireland was a papal possession with the King of England as Lord of Ireland. In 1542, after an Act of Irish Parliament, Henry VIII was proclaimed King of Ireland, as the Lordship of Ireland became the Kingdom of Ireland.
Okay.
However, Henry VIII was not recognised by the Catholic powers throughout Europe. After Henry VIII's death in 1547, his Protestant-raised 9-year-old son Edward VI ascended to the throne, but he died of
This guy's accent, okay, I didn't understand anything he just said, so. Oh, and by the way, King Henry VIII makes me think of Herman's Hermits. You know, I'm Henry VIII, I am, Henry VIII, I am, I am.
1547, his Protestant-raised 9-year-old son Edward VI ascended to the throne,
Okay.
but
Protestant-raised son is what I got from that.
he died of illness just a few years later at the age of 15.
Wow.
Mary I, Henry VIII's daughter, was next in line to the throne, and since Mary was nearly 20 years older than her half-brother Edward, she was raised before the Protestant Reformation and was therefore Catholic. Because of this, Mary I was recognised as the Queen of Ireland. Ireland had remained loyal to the Pope, and the island was almost entirely Catholic. In 1603, after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, the last of the Tudor dynasty, James VI of Scotland also became King of England because of his somewhat unique family ancestry, in which he was the son of Mary I, Queen of Scots, and also the great-great-grandson of Henry VII. He was therefore known as James I, King of England, and also King of Ireland as well. This was known as the Union of the Crown. First Queen of Scots, and also the great-great-grandson of Henry VII. He was therefore known as James I, King of England, and also King of Ireland as well. This was known as the Union of the Crowns, in which Scotland, England and Ireland all shared a common monarch. In 1609, under James I's reign, the Plantation of Ulster was a process by which Scottish and English settlers confiscated land from the Gaelic Irish. This was seen as a way to stop rebellion in the north, as Ulster had been a region of Ireland most resistant to English rule. Although there had been plenty of plantations in Ireland throughout the years, the plantation of Ulster was by far the most successful, and within just a few decades the Protestant colonist population was thriving and even made up a majority in some areas in the north. In 1641, Irish Catholics in Ulster staged a rebellion against the settlers, which led to the Irish Confederate Wars between the Irish Catholic Confederation and the Scottish and English settlers. Most of the island of Ireland was under de facto Irish Catholic rule for several years. This was until 1649 when Oliver Cromwell and his New Model Army conquered Ireland after overthrowing the English monarchy, executing Charles I and declaring himself Lord Protector of Scotland, England and Ireland. Cromwell ruled.
Oh my word. Oliver Cromwell, obviously I've heard of him, he's very famous. Where is he from again? Wait, he conquered England, but he's from England? Did I not hear that right?
The island of Ireland was under de facto Irish Catholic rule for several years. This was until 1649 when Oliver Cromwell and his New Model Army conquered Ireland after overthrowing the English monarchy, executing Charles I and declaring himself Lord Protector of Scotland.
Okay, so he's English, but he just overthrew the monarchy. For some reason, when I heard that, I thought he was from another country or something.
Ireland after overthrowing the English monarchy, executing Charles I and declaring himself Lord Protector of Scotland, England and Ireland. Cromwell ruled over the three kingdoms until his death in 1658. During this time there was more confiscation of land from the native Catholics, and anyone even suspected of being involved in the 1641 rebellion was executed. His son Richard very briefly ruled afterwards, but the monarchy was restored in 1660 when Charles II became king, son of the executed Charles I.
I mean, look at that. That guy is gonna win a fashion show right there. This is Charles the First, is that right?
When Charles II became king,
Charles
son of
II.
the executed Charles I.
Oh.
Charles II was Protestant, but his brother James II had converted to Catholicism during his time in France, so when Charles II died in 1685, Scotland, England and Ireland once again had a Catholic monarch. At this point, the majority of people in Scotland and England were Protestant, and many were uneasy with James II as their monarch. However, next in line to the throne was his daughter Mary, who was Protestant. This all changed in 1688 with the birth of his son, the would-be James III, who would undoubtedly be raised Catholic. The only reason his daughter Mary was Protestant was because his late brother and former king demanded she be raised as such. So with this change, it looked like Scotland and England would have a Catholic monarchy for the foreseeable future. The birth of the king's son sparked what became known as the Glorious Revolution, in which the two major political parties invited William of Orange to invade England and take.
I've heard of the Glorious Revolution before. I think I learned about it in school, so that's something that's familiar. I must have just forgotten about some of this stuff that I learned about in school. Also, this going back and forth between Irish and Catholics, I don't know the history of it. Obviously, back then it was a huge deal because of the way society was structured, I suppose. Because wasn't the church more connected with the monarchy? So yeah, I think this whole Protestant Reformation, all of that stuff is stuff that I need to look into more, because obviously I don't know enough about the history to fully understand the consequences of what's happening here. But I do get that it's a big deal. But all of this going back and forth is making me a little dizzy, honestly.
The Glorious Revolution, in which the two major political parties invited William of Orange to invade England and take the throne. William of Orange successfully defeated his father-in-law, who also happened to be his uncle, since William and Mary were first cousins, and they took the throne together as William III and Mary II, King and Queen of England. Of course, this also made them King and Queen of Ireland, and with a Catholic majority this was obviously not received well. This started a war in Ireland between the native Irish, led by James II, who were mainly Catholic, against the kingdoms of Scotland and England.
Okay, Williamite War in Ireland. We have James II in England. No. Yeah. This is getting more complicated by the minute. Also, this William of Orange is something we learned about in history over here in the US. I remember these names from history. Well, it's just been so long ago, I don't remember this stuff from school. You know how you just forget stuff when you become an adult? That's where I am with this.
The Williamite War in Ireland resulted in victory for King William. For the next century, Catholic majority Ireland was ruled by a Protestant minority, known as the Protestant Ascendancy. In 1707, the Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of England joined to create the Kingdom of Great Britain. And then in 1798, there was an uprising against British rule.
So that's how the flag came to be. Scotland. It's Scotland and England's flag put together. That's the Union Jack. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know where the British flag came from.
To create the Kingdom of Great Britain. And then in 1798 there was an uprising against British rule in Ireland in the Irish Rebellion of 1798, inspired by the French Revolution a decade earlier. The rebellion failed, but it caused a lot of uncertainty on the political situation of Ireland. There were concerns that Ireland might ally themselves with France and break away from British rule. So in 1801, Ireland joined the Union and became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland.
Got it.
Opposition to the Union was strong and occasionally escalated into violence. The late 1800s saw a rise in demand.
Wait a second, I was paying more attention to the flag coming together than what he was saying. But okay. Yeah, see, I see how the red is missing and the like cross.
Concerns that Ireland might ally themselves with France and break away from British rule. So in 1801, Ireland joined the Union and became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland.
Okay.
Opposition to the Union was strong and occasionally escalated into violence. The late 1800s saw a rise in demand for self-government, and in 1886 the first Home Rule Bill was proposed. In response to this, the Liberal Unionist Party was created in support of the Union and opposed Irish Home Rule. The bill failed, as did the second bill proposed in 1892, but in 1914 the third Home Rule Bill was passed. But 1914 was also the year in which World War I started, and therefore the bill had to be put on hold. With the British Army still occupied with the war in Europe, Irish Republicans staged a rebellion in Dublin called the Easter Rising, with a goal of putting an end to British rule in Ireland and establishing an Irish Republic. The rising took place over the course of just a few days, but nearly 500 people died, most of whom were civilians. But with far superior numbers, the British Army managed to suppress the rebellion. The result was an unconditional surrender by the rebel forces, and most of the rebel leaders were executed. In the 1918 UK general election, an Irish political party called Sinn Féin, who supported Irish independence, and many of their members had participated in the Easter Rising, won 73 of the 105 Irish seats at the British Parliament. But they chose to not take their seats at the British Parliament and instead decided to form their own Irish Parliament and proclaim an Irish Republic as a newly independent country.
Okay.
The Irish Republic claimed the whole island of Ireland, but there was a lot of support for the Union in the north, especially in Ulster, in which 4 of the 9 counties won a Unionist majority. This led to the Irish War for Independence, primarily between the IRA and the British Army. In 1920, with the war still ongoing, a 4th Home Rule Bill was passed, superseding the 3rd Home Rule Bill that was passed but never implemented. This partitioned Ireland into Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Northern Ireland consisted of 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster. This was despite 2 of them having a Catholic majority. The rest of the island became Southern Ireland. The split was intended to be a temporary solution to the war. So Ireland would remain part of the United Kingdom with Home Rule, but instead of having 1 Irish Parliament in Dublin, there would be 2, one in Dublin for Southern Ireland and one in Belfast for Northern Ireland. This was an attempt to meet demands of both Irish nationalists and Irish Unionists. And while the Northern Irish government was successfully established, the Southern Irish government was not. The war continued and the Southern Irish government never functioned. The Irish War for Independence lasted for 2.5 years, resulting in a ceasefire and the Anglo-Irish Treaty. The treaty established the Irish Free State, which would become a dominion of the British Commonwealth, along with the likes of Canada, Australia and South Africa, among others at the time. The treaty included the whole island of Ireland, but had an opt-out clause for Northern Ireland, which they immediately exercised, so the short-lived Southern Ireland became the Irish Free State. Some were happy with this situation, but others were not. Many were unhappy that Ireland was still part of the British Empire and wanted total independence. So the Irish nationalists were split between the pro-treaty nationalists and the anti-treaty nationalists. The political party Sinn Féin split into 2 separate parties, pro-treaty Sinn Féin that was happy with the status quo and the anti-treaty Sinn Féin that sought full independence. In the 1922 Irish general election, the 2 political parties that won the most seats were Sinn Féin and Sinn Féin, with the pro-treaty party winning more seats. The disagreement escalated into civil war just 1 year after the end of the War for Independence. Many men who had fought together in Ireland's War for Independence were now on opposing sides of a civil war. The pro-treaty forces emerged victorious, affirming the status of the Irish Free State a British dominion. After the war, the anti-treaty Sinn Féin refused to take their seats at the Irish Parliament in protest of the treaty. Because of this, their leader, Eamon de Valera, resigned from the party and founded a new political party, Fianna Fáil, and they became the dominant political party in Ireland from 1932 onwards. He strongly opposed the treaty as well, but thought his former party's tactics were not helpful. In 1937, a referendum was held for a new constitution to remove all British ties from Ireland. 56% of people voted in favour, and Ireland adopted a new constitution, becoming a fully independent country. The country changed its name to Ireland. Just Ireland. The country is often referred to as the Republic of Ireland to differentiate itself from the island of Ireland, but its official name is simply Ireland. This was to reflect the fact that Ireland's claimed territory was the entire island, believing the partition of Ireland to be illegitimate. Despite this claim though, Northern Ireland continued as normal, as part of the United Kingdom. Ireland exercised their independence by choosing to remain neutral in World War II, which started just 2 years later. And while that should be the end of the story, there were 3 decades of ongoing violence from the late 1960s to 1990s in a period known as the Troubles. The violence was mainly concentrated in Northern Ireland, but occasionally spilled over into Ireland, England and even mainland Europe. Although the majority of Northern Ireland's population was Protestant and Unionist, there was a substantial minority that were Catholic and nationalist and wanted Northern Ireland to join the Republic. After 3 decades of conflict between various organisations and thousands of casualties, a ceasefire was called to put a stop to the violence in 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement. The agreement caused the Republic of Ireland to amend their constitution, removing their territorial claim over Northern Ireland, and the British and Irish governments agreed that if a majority of people in Northern Ireland wish to leave the United Kingdom and join the Republic, the governments will make it happen. The lasting impact of the Troubles can still be seen today, especially in Belfast, in which there are walls that separate Protestant and Catholic communities, and there is still occasional violence. However, the situation is improving, and the government has made a goal to remove all of these so-called peace walls by the year 2023.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea that that was still a thing over in Ireland, but you're gonna have to let me know if you live in Ireland or Northern Ireland. I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble here. I'm gonna call something the wrong thing, so forgive me for that if that happens. But yeah, let me know kind of how that situation is right now over there. And it is the Troubles. Part of that was going on while I was a kid, and so I was too young to really understand what was going on. But I'm glad that it went back to the beginning of things, all the way back to the Norman invasion of 1066, so we went back a good 1,000 years. And even though it was a lot of information to take in, I'm glad I watched it because it did give me at least an overview of what was going on. The whole like James I, the Scottish king taking the throne of England. That was also something that came up in the previous video on the difference between the UK, England, and Great Britain. Had a lot of people try to explain that to me. Still complicated because there are a lot of monarchs going on there, a lot of switching around going on. I'm sure one of these days it'll all gel up here once I've learned more about all of this history and learned more about how the monarchy works over in the UK. But I did see like how Northern Ireland became a very different kind of cultural region than, you know, the Republic of Ireland. So it looks like just a really complicated situation. Obviously an 11-minute video is not going to cover everything, but it's a social, cultural, religious, political situation that looks like is still ongoing to a certain extent over there. So we're definitely going to dive more into Ireland, the history of Ireland, and more into these various conflicts. If you can answer any of my like 1,000 questions I had in this video, I do apologize for pausing it so much. I know some of you get really annoyed at that. But if I don't get the questions out of the way while I'm watching, I'll either forget about them or, you know, I just like talking about them in context to where we are in the video at that time. But I do appreciate all of the recommendations for learning more about this topic. But Roger and I will be getting to more about the UK in future videos, so you'll want to stay tuned for all of that. If you enjoyed this one, make sure that you like and subscribe. My next video is going to finally be getting into the realm of space. I'm going to be taking a very first look at India's space program, the ISRO. So I'm really excited about that one. It's going to be a brand new adventure for me anyway. I hope you guys come along for the ride, and we will see you next time.